Welcome back, everybody, to continuing coverage of YETICON 2022 on November 19th, 22 in Lakewood, Colorado. This is round 3 action between Matthew Dennis on the left at 1-1 and Brian Mann on the right at 1-1. We did see Matthew Dennis in the last match, but because of our pairings, Matthew ended up at our feature table for 2 rounds in a row. Congrats, Matthew. This is going to be a very interesting matchup featuring Matthew's green deck with a lot of elves and spitting slugs and Brian's Gauntlets of Sorrow deck. I know you're all excited to see it. I am excited to see it. Let's jump on to game number 1. And in game number 1, we have Brian on the right, Matthew on the left. Brian rolls a 6 on his go. Looks like they are going to get ready to take a look at their first 7. And there is the sportsmanlike handshake. Love to start off a match that way. Very cool. Both players excited for this matchup, as am I, and I hope you are as well. Brian is going to be on the play here with this one, and he starts with, all right, we have a power plant. Urza's power plant, the bug version, my favorite one personally. So we know that Brian's going to be on a pretty cool deck here if you're playing a Tron archetype. Over on Matthew's side, it's a Script Sprites and a basic forest to start. Brian's side, he's got a mine, Urza's mine. 2 parts of the Tron are complete, and then a time vault. Very, very cool start for Brian. Very interesting card to go with. He can skip a turn to untap it. Of course, he can also twiddle that time vault if he has some blue mana and a twiddle to use it as kind of a recurring time vault. All right, over on Matthew's side, it is mana, mana, mana. We have a Forest and a Mox Emerald. Script Sprites are still waiting to make their first attack. Let's see what he does in his first main phase here. It's a Spitting Slug. We saw that in the game against Brandon last round. And the Script Sprites attack for 1. Brian's down to 19. And just like that, boom, look at that play. It is a Tower completing the Tron and a Mishra's War Machine. 5/5 banding, yes. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you must discard a card from your hand or it becomes tapped and deals 3 damage to you. Kind of a funky drawback there. A Bayou over there on Matthew's side and a Demonic Tutor. So Matthew, I wonder what I would even look for here in this situation with Grandma's old Mishra's War Machine staring you down. It's actually no joke of a card there, though. A 5/5 banding, not as relevant just yet, but 5/5 pounder is staring him down. Also, Tron is online, so a choice for maybe next turn could be Ice Storm to take Brian off of his Tron. He's got 7 mana per turn if he wants it. All right, Matthew's looking to see what he wants to do. He is going to come across with the Sprites, the Flyers, so they can get in for another damage. And here's Brian. In his upkeep, he's got to go to discard, and that is another power plant. That's the kind of cooking rock power plant art. Very cool. That is the discard to satisfy the Mishra's War Machine. We're going to see quite a lot of that this game. He's tapping 7 mana, and look at that. 4 of them put down the Icy Manipulator, 2 more of them for a Howling Mine, and then 1 more to activate the Icy Manipulator on the Howling Mine. And now he is swinging in for 5 with the War Machine. Oh, and he decides to take it back. He looks like he pump faked a little bit there. I think he saw the Argothian Pixies, who can block artifact creatures and have the damage reduced to 0. So I think Brian had a pump fake there on attack. Argothian Pixies can hold them back no problem. Also, Argothian Pixies can't be blocked by artifact creatures, so they will be able to sneak in if he does want to attack with them. Probably will not, though, because it holds them back. All right, tapping 3 mana. There is that Ice Storm on the Urza's Tower, probably the target for the Demonic Tutor. And he's coming across with the Script Sprites again. Brian goes to 17 and goes to untap. In his upkeep, he's going to discard a Psyblast, so pretty cool. He's going to draw 2. The Howling Mine was tapped, so Matthew only drew 1. And now he's looking to see what he wants to use now. He's going to use his Icy Manipulator, and he's going to tap the Argothian Pixies instead of the Howling Mine because now he can swing in for 5, and the Spitting Slug is going to chump block. So Brian's going to remove the Spitting Slug card and give a little bit of card advantage back to Matthew, allow him to draw 2 cards from the Howling Mine. You see that? Yep, just reminding, being good sports about that. Always good to see old school players remind each other to make sure they get their benefits as well. All right, there's a Scavenger Folk. Scavenger Folk is actually kind of a big play here. There's a ton of juicy artifacts over on Brian's side that Matthew could target, and another Spitting Slug to replace the one that he lost. All right, in come the Script Sprites, our only Flyers right there. He's going to keep back the Pixies for blocking the War Machine. Brian's upkeep, he's going to discard another Icy Manipulator. So I wonder, you got to think about what Brian must have in his hand when he's discarding really sweet cards like Psyblast and Icy Manipulator. So again, the same thing. This time he's attacking for 5 after tapping the Pixies. Another chump block from the Spitting Slug. So the Mishra's War Machine has gobbled up 2 Spitting Slugs in this game. I didn't know if I was going to be saying that at YETICON, yet here we are in 2022. Well done, players. Love to see that. Matthew taking a look at his options right now. He's going to tap a green, and that is a crumble on the Icy. So Brian is going to gain 4 life, but he's going to lose his Icy that he was so potently tapping everything. So crumble, that must be as a main deck crumble. So pretty sweet play. Don't forget the Scavenger Folk over there too. Brian discarding a Mirror Universe, another sweet card. He's playing down another tower. I believe that's another tower. So his Tron should be back online. He's looking to see what to do. We're going to go on the offensive here. There's nothing he can really do with the Pixies down. And Brian still just has lots and lots of colorless mana. I think he's got 9 mana on the board there. So he's in Colossus range if he's running those. He discarded the Mirror Universe, but both players back at 20 because of the crumble. Brian gained his life, passes the turn. Matthew is going to do the Howling Mine, draw 2, and then he's going to look at 2 more for the Sylvan. You can actually look at 4 cards on the side of your hand with that, and then discard any 2 of them. So something to think about if you're playing Sylvan Libraries with Howling Mines around. You draw 4 cards, keep them separate from your hand, then you can put back any 2. All right, Matthew's side, he's going to put down an Llanowar Elves, and then there's the big Urnum Djinn. So the Script Sprites are going to attack. That's going to get Brian back to 19. But now this is a little bit tricky. If Brian doesn't play any other creatures and leaves the Urnum up there, that War Machine is going to get Forest Walk next upkeep for Matthew. So Brian is going to play an island down. That's just something to keep in mind because that's going to be probably a big thing to consider here on both players' sides is you're going to have a Forest Walking 5/5er, which is much more relevant than the banding. All right, Brian's going to cast Ancestral. This is, I believe, in his main phase. First main phase. He plays down a Sapphire, so he's got another blue mana. He's going to tap the Sapphire for that blue. And there is a Twiddle for the Time Vault. So the name of the game, the Twiddle Vault, is online. So he's going to untap it with Twiddle and retap it to take an extra turn. Now Brian has to consider if he's going to be doing anything else this turn. It looks like no, he's deciding to go to the Time Vault turn. He's discarding an island, drawing 2 for the Howling Mine, tapping blue, and 2 more. There's a Psyblast for the Pixies. Now, this is in response to that Psyblast. Matthew is activating the Scavenger Folk and tapping them to destroy the Sapphire. So destroying the blue mana for Brian, and then the Pixies will go ahead and take the damage. Brian goes to 17 from the Psyblast, and now we have a Mishra's War Machine coming across. And it's a chump block with the Elves because, remember, we have not had an upkeep of Matthew yet. So it has not gained Forest Walk yet. So Brian there plays a Time Walk. He's going to get another turn. He's discarding another War Machine. There's a lot of fast action here. Another War Machine, drawing 2 more. There's a Sorrow's Path from Brian. Sorrow's Path is a land. It allows you to swip the blocking assignments of 2 defending players' blockers. But more relevant to Brian's deck is whenever it becomes tapped, it deals 2 damage to its controller and 2 damage to all of its controller's creatures. That's the most relevant part for Brian's particular build of Sorrow's Path. So the War Machine is not yet Forest Walking because Matthew hasn't had an upkeep. So when Matthew has an upkeep, the Urnum Djinn will go. So now that Matthew's untapped, there it is. The War Machine is now a Forest Walker. So it can sneak past that Urnum Djinn all day long, as long as he has a forest or a bayou. All right, so Matthew taking a look at his cards. He still has the Howling Mine Sylvan combo, so you can draw 4 and keep any 2 and put back any 2 without any penalty. There's another Sylvan library. So Sylvans don't actually stack like some folks think they were, and Matthew doesn't think that they do that when he's talking to Brian about this. He just wants to have another Sylvan down in case of shenanigans. But you have to completely resolve the first Sylvan before you can start the second Sylvan, so you can't draw like extra 5 cards or whatever and then put all of them back. You've got to do one, put any back, and then do the other one. All right, on to Brian's turn now. He discards another island, draws 2, plays a Maze of Ith. So Brian is really building a big position here, and he's coming across for 5 Forest Walking. And right there, finally, Matthew is not able to chump block because it's a Forest Walker, and so he's going to take some damage there. So the Urnum Djinn is now online, but unfortunately Brian has the Maze of Ith, just like we saw Matthew have the Maze of Ith against Brandon in round 2. All right, Matthew's taking a look at a couple of cards. And it looks like he is going to take an extra one. He's going to take the damage from the Sylvan, so he's going to keep 3 cards, 2 from the Howling Mine, and then 1 extra one from the Sylvan. All right, so he's going to tap 2, play down a Pixies, play down another Sprites, and another Sprites. So he's building an army of small creatures plus the Urnum Djinn there. He's going to attack just with the Sprites. Brian sends back the Pixies. Or sorry, just with the Sprites, and Brian sends back the Sprites. Brian untaps, discards another island, draws 2. So Brian doesn't need a ton of blue mana for what he's doing. He's taking a look at his options. He's got that Forest Walking 5/5er. If he has another Twiddle, he could take another turn. And if he has another big artifact, he's got plenty of colorless mana. And it looks like Brian decides to stay back on this one. He decides to keep the War Machine back at home. So he's going to have his 5/5er just wait. All right, Matthew is taking a look. He's drawing his cards, taking a glance. It looks like he just keeps his 2. Plays a Pendelhaven. That's pretty relevant with all of his 1/1 flyers on the board. Plays down another Llanowar Elf. So he's got, look at that, almost his whole playmat. I love to see all these creatures in our green decks. All right, so we're attacking with 3 Scrib Sprites, all in the air. So Brian's going to send one back. And before he reaches for his dice, Matthew's going to pump. So Brian is going to take 3 damage. He's going to go down to 12 now. All right, Brian's going to untap. In his upkeep, he's going to feed the trigger for the War Machine. And look at that, Brian discarding a Library of Alexandria. So it's funny to see at this point in the game that card just not being super relevant, that Brian can just kind of chuck it. All right, there's 5 Forest Walking again. Matthew goes down to 6. Brian's considering if he wants to do anything in his second main phase. Another Icy Manipulator would be pretty good here, too, for Brian to tap the Howling Mine to not let Matthew get that second card. He does have 2 Sylvans, so even if Brian could destroy one with a Chaos Orb or something, then Matthew could still continue to draw and see the extra cards. So he's drawing 2 for the Howling Mine and then 2 for the Sylvan. Matthew taking a peek, deciding what he wants to do. He's already at 6 life, and there's 5 Forest Walking damage on the board on the other side. And it looks like he's taking another card. He's going to go down to 2. So right here, I think Matthew has a line where he thinks he can take it in this one turn, maybe some combination of Berserks and Giant Growths. So he casts a Regrowth. I'm not sure what the target was, but look at Brian tapping a bunch of colorless mana with Regrowth on the stack. He taps a blue, and he's tapping a ton of mana, all of his Tron pieces, and there is a huge power sink. That is huge game right there, because that power sink is going to empty the mana pool of Matthew, and it's going to force him to tap all of his mana-producing lands. He could maybe pump with a Pendelhaven in response to that, but I think he just taps it for mana. He doesn't have to tap his Mox, and nor does he have to tap his Elves. So he does have access to 2 mana now, but the Regrowth is countered, and all of his mana are tied up. So whatever play he had planned is likely not going to be able to go through here with that huge power sink. So that could be the game right there. Brian's going to untap, discard a card. He's going to draw 2. He's got a 5 damage Forest Walker, and that is it for game number 1. So that power sink may have really been the game there. Matthew, I'm not sure what his line was in that last round, taking an extra card, but he wouldn't have taken the extra damage there unless I think he had a plan to get through for a single lethal attack. And Brian being on the spot there with the counter on the Regrowth, I'm not sure what Matthew was targeting with the Regrowth, but whatever it was, Brian didn't want to deal with whatever the strategy was going to be. So let's counter that, drain the mana pool, and lock you out. So what an exciting game number 1 here in round 3. Let's take a look and see what this players can do in game number 2. And going to game 2 here, Brian on the right, Matthew on the left. Brian is taking a look at his cards after the Mishra's War Machine beats in game 1. Looks like Brian is taking a mulligan. Matthew's going to be on the play here as we go to it. And he's going to start with, looks like a Bayou into a Scrib Sprites. Pretty good start. Matthew's had very consistent starts with his deck. His mana base and his creature base have been there for him every game that we've seen here on this channel. Brian over there has a Lotus. He's going to sacrifice a Lotus, and he's going to use that to play a Time Twister. So the Lotus goes to the yard, then the Lotus gets shuffled back in. Time Twister is set aside in the new graveyard. So they're getting ready to do the twist here in game number 2. That will certainly help Brian with the card disadvantage of taking a mulligan. So he got to draw on this one, see if he could get the combination of the Lotus and the quick Time Twister. He has played a land for his turn, so no more land drop this time, but I know Brian is rocking some power in that deck, so he might still have a play or two after he draws his 7 on the Time Twister. This is one of examples of power begets power that we sometimes say in old school. So Brian's taking a look at his fresh 7 cards. He slides that island over there and looks like he just passed his turn. All right, so no double follow-up play there to the Time Twister. Over on Matthew's side, it is a Maze of Ith. That's going to be a problem for some of Brian's bigger creatures. That's been a good answer. He's going to swing in with those Script Sprites. Brian goes to 19. All right, Brian, on his turn, he's going to play an Urza's Tower and just say go ahead. All right, Tower comes down. First piece of the Tron set, and Brian also has his blue mana for his Twiddles, his Power Sinks, and we've also seen the Psy Blasts. And right there, it looks like Matthew kind of pump fakes a crumble on the tower, but yeah, the tower is actually a land. It seems like it could be an artifact there, but it's actually a land, so the crumble comes back. Another Script Sprites does come down, though, and now he's going to attack for 2, so both creatures there. Of course, the first Script Sprite he just cast is Summoning Sickness, so can't go for 3 this turn. On Brian's side, he's got a Relic Barrier. Unfortunately, no juicy targets for the Relic Barrier for Brian just yet. Relic Barrier is tap to tap target artifact. It's a great card for a lot of things. He uses it to combo with his Howling Mines, and it's also a great defensive card for a lot of different things that opponents can bring in. So over on Matthew's side, though, he's coming in for 3 with the Weenies, and the Scavenger Folk is down. So the Scavenger Folk has also been a potent answer for Matthew on this side, although Matthew doesn't have any artifacts, so he's probably going to wait to blow up that Scavenger Folk and use it offensively rather than go for it on the Relic Barrier, unless he has a potent artifact he wants to play. Brian's tapping 3. Brian tapping 2. Brian's tapping 3. And down comes the Serendib Efreet. There we go. Library of Alexandria also coming down for Brian. I don't believe the library is on just yet. I can't quite tell on Brian's hand. I apologize. I can't quite see how many are in there. Over on Matthew's side, another Forest. So access to plenty of mana. He could play a Spitting Slug if he's got one. He could play an Urnham if he's got one. And we have seen those out of Matthew. So he's taking a look over at that Serendib. That Maze of Ith is a great card to have for Serendib. I'm guessing that's what Brian was thinking about as he was... he does indeed blow up the Scavenger Folk for the Relic Barrier. So the Relic Barrier does go down in anticipation of an artifact coming down. And I wonder if that's what Brian was thinking about when he was not sure whether to cast his Efreet there, is if he was going to be able to get over the top of that maze. So now comes down the Icy Manipulator. That's a great target. He does use the library to pay a mana to tap the Maze of Ith. The crumble happens in response, but the effect is still on the stack. So the Maze of Ith is still tapped, and then it will go to the graveyard. Brian gains 4 life, so we're actually even at 17 now after all of those beats with the little guys. The crumble gives Brian 4 life, and we're back to even. Over on Matthew's side, he is coming in to attack. That's a nice counterattack to that Efreet, especially now that he's got a Maze of Ith with no Icy Manipulator. Brian's going to go down to 13 after the attack there, and then another damage from the Efreet. And Brian's looking at what his best play is going to be here. That maze is going to be tricky, as his Efreet is going to continue to ping him every turn. And if he keeps the Efreet back, he's getting pinged, but he can keep back some of the little creatures over on Matthew's side. I think that's what he's thinking of, and he indeed does. He decides to keep the Efreet back home. If he had attacked with it, it'd be kind of an interesting choice for Matthew to use the maze, use the maze on it, or let it come through and let it stay tapped. That'd be an interesting call, because then he could swing in, he could counterattack. So he may decline the maze there if Brian did attack in. Anyway, Brian took another damage there and then passed his turn back to Matthew. Matthew's taking a look. There's an Ice Storm, and the Ice Storm is going to be targeting the power plant there. Looks like Brian has 2 pieces of power. Yeah, the power plant was down and the tower was down. So the Ice Storm takes down. Brian is no longer 1 land away from getting to Tron. Brian's going to draw, and now his library is active, so he's going to go ahead and draw another card. There's another power plant to replace the one that he just lost. He's at 11, though, with a Serendib and a Maze of Ith keeping it home. So he's not out of the woods yet, even with an active library. And he also doesn't want to play too aggressively because you want to stay on an active library. You want to keep that card advantage engine going. Meanwhile, Matthew keeps the pressure on with another small weenie creature there. He's got a ton of mana in the form of those elves and his lands. He's also got a decent amount of damage. It looks like Brian does now have Tron. I think that's a mine coming down, Urza's mine. So he plays a twiddle on the library to draw. Taps an island again. He plays another twiddle on the library to draw again. So I think he just keeps ripping twiddles and is just using the twiddles to draw over and over again. That's a new application of twiddle that I've never seen before. Congrats, Brian. That's a very cool line that he found there. Unfortunately, if he's just digging and finding cards that are not going to be useful for him, it might be all for naught. We'll see how it goes. Brian does end up discarding an island there at the end of turn. Over on Matthew's side, he's going to attack with, looks like 3 creatures. The sprites are coming in. And he's going to tap a forest, put down a giant growth. Brian reaches for the Ifrit to put it in the graveyard from the giant growth, and he plays a berserk on top of it. So the giant growth berserk combo means he's going to have 4 trample damage coming in, and then 2 damage from the unblocked elf. So that's how Brian is all the way down at 4. So the Ifrit is gone, and the trample damage gets through for a pretty big hit there. Brian is now, he's dead on board, unless he can get down another defensive card. There's a Gauntlets of Chaos, and Brian loves playing with this card. Gauntlets of Chaos can let you swap a permanent with your opponent of the same type. So it's 5 to cast, 5 to activate. I believe that Tron is going to let him have enough mana to actually activate it this turn. He's going to sacrifice the Gauntlets, and he's going to give a power plant over to Matthew, and he's going to take his Maze of Ith. So that is another creative application for these kinds of cards. So he's got Matthew's Maze of Ith that can keep him alive for one more turn here. I think that was Brian's only line. There's a Spitting Slug down. He's attacking for 4. He'll maze 1 back and see what he can draw here. Brian likes to play the Gauntlets with Sorrow's Path so that he can give you a Sorrow's Path and then tap it with his Icy to have you and your creatures take the damage, which would be a huge blow to Matthew's board. Unfortunately, he had to use it just for survival mode, it looks like here, down in single-digit life. He's going to play another tower. He takes a look at Matthew's board, and there's the handshake for game 2. So that was the little creatures came over the top there, and it was just overwhelming there on Brian's side. A couple of cool plays from both players. The Giant Growth Berserk combo is always nice, especially when it also tramples over a big creature on the opponent's side. And then we also saw the great Gauntlets of Chaos switching a Urza's Power Plant for a Maze of Ith, something that probably does not happen often in the old school circle. So both these players take another look at their sideboards to get ready for an exciting game number 3. Let's go to it. And here we are with the rubber game. This is game 3 of round 3. Both players tied at 1 game apiece. Brian's going to be on the play after taking the loss of game 2 with all of those beatdowns of the little creatures and the Berserk Giant Growth combo. Brian looks like he's taking a mulligan again, and on the play, this is probably not where Brian wants to be. Mulligan on the play, the card disadvantage is going to be real here. So Brian plays down, I think that's a Power Plant. That's the Trapper Keeper art for Power Plant. And over on Matthew's side, Scavenger Folk, turn 1 creature. So his opponents have been taking 1 on turn 2 quite often. He plays down a Sylvan Library and then sends the Scavenger Folk in. Brian, playing quickly, is going to play an island and knock down the Time Vault. So Brian now is 1 twiddle away from getting an extra turn. Here is Matthew taking a look at 2 extra cards from the Sylvan, decides not to take any extra cards, anyway that is. And looking at his hand, I see a Wailuli Wolf, I think, maybe another Scavenger Folk in there. Plays down a forest, so he could actually play, there's a Spitting Slug maybe as well. So he's got a few things he can think about. He could get down two smaller creatures, or if he has a Spitting Slug, he can get down 1 more potent. There's the Wolf, and there's another Scavenger Folk. So he does opt to get 2 more 1/1s down and attack again with the Scavenger Folk. So Brian down to 18. There's an Urza's Mine. So we have 2 pieces of the Tron. Brian's going to tap 3, and there is the Serendip Ifrit. So he has some pressure on the board, and more importantly, it looks like he also has something that's going to stop all of those little guys from coming in, maybe just in time here before he was going to take a big attack there for 3. So Matthew taking a look. He does get a Maze of Ith. So again, that has been a thorn in the side of all of the Ifrits and Jinns of his opponents. There's a Spitting Slug. So the Maze of Ith is there. Can be used defensively or offensively. So you can attack with a bunch of creatures, maze back the one that gets blocked to save it, and then let the others get through. So Brian on his turn is going to take a damage, and now he's going to attack 17 each. Brian is going to play a Time Walk. All right. So Brian's going to take another damage, untap. 16 is his life total now. After that, plays a Lotus. So Lotus could be another Time Twister, could be another Ifrit. Let's see what Brian's got. It is another Ifrit, and he's going to swing in again. And Matthew taking the damage from that Ifrit. Untapping now. So 14. And he is going to take 4. So there he is, aggressively going on the Sylvan Library, going down to 10. Brian's at 16 with two Serendibs up there and one Serendib untapped to kind of hold back the army. And Matthew may have declined to use the maze there for the purposes of offense, for leaving one Serendib tapped. And he does use the Scavenger Folk to blow up the Lotus, which is not a bad play because, like I said, that Lotus can turn into a lot of potent spells, especially sorcery or creature spells when Brian gets a turn. So popping that now is certainly a line to consider. He plays down an Argothian Pixies. Brian is going to play a Psyblast, and he says, nope, yep, Psyblast to your dice. Psyblast to the life total. He's going to take 2 to 12. I'm going to put Matthew down on 6 here. He's going to attack with both of those Ifrits. That's 6 damage coming in. Has to use the maze to stay in this game. And Matthew's going to go down to 3. And Brian says, go on ahead, pass a turn. He's going to draw, take a look at 2 more. Puts them back. Yet can't take an extra one there, but you can look at them. Plays a Forest down. And looking at what he's got, I think I see a Tsunami there. Tsunami, a potent sideboard card that blows up all the islands, and he's going to play it. Brian's going to mana drain the Tsunami, so he's going to have that 4 mana next turn. And Matthew's looking at his options and says, yep, that's it. That's game number 3. Not many options there for sure after having your big spell countered. No matter how many small creatures you could get down on the ground, I think Brian's Ifrits were going to come in. A second Maze of Ith may have been the only saving grace that Matthew could have dug for right there. So at the end of round 3 here in an exciting 3-game final, we have Brian over Matthew. Brian moves to 2-1. Matthew goes to 1-2 here in round number 3 at YETICON. So both of these players going to be moving on through this event. We have 2 more rounds to go here from YETICON, round 4, and then we also have the final top match here at the featured table for round number 5. I have been Corey, and I will see you as we go on to round 4.